Welcome to Mother-Daughter Projects. I'm Steph. Today we're going to remove old mortar, mix new mortar, and apply it to fix these outdoor steps. Over the last 12 years, a few of these tiles had separated from the concrete structure underneath. Before we can attach them back, we need to remove all the old mortar. We're using a rotary hammer with chisel blade. This is a tool we own, but you can also rent a heavy-duty version of this at the hardware store. This is very time-consuming and labor-intensive, but it is the most efficient method that we found to remove the mortar. Here you can see two spots that have the old mortar removed and two spots that haven't been done yet. We also use the rotary hammer to carefully remove tiles that were broken or that we're going to reattach. The best method that we found was to sit on a stool with the chisel blade facing down, and Mom followed along with a wet dry vac to collect the dust. We're both wearing a respirator, eye protection, hearing protection, along with steel-toed boots. We also tried using an angle grinder with diamond wheel. This didn't work as well, as it's better for cutting larger chunks of concrete like we shared in our How to Repair an Uneven Sidewalk video. If you're not going to reuse the tile, you can also use the rotary hammer to break up the old tile, but we wanted to try to salvage as much as we could. I did have to take frequent breaks as the vibration from the rotary hammer was fatiguing. I did wear some anti-vibration gloves to help a little bit. I also found it fatiguing to have to hold the power button in the on position. So I put a piece of Velcro around it to hold it in place, and that worked fairly well. This prep work step takes the most time, so make sure you plan accordingly. Once we had finished removing the mortar, we swept the area and did one final cleaning with a leaf blower. With the mortar removed, it was time to prep the tiles. Mom used a variety of tools to remove the old mortar from the tiles. The most successful was a carbide rasp on her Fin Multi-Master tool. We used a chisel to remove all the old grout. She also cleaned all the tiles that we're reusing and a couple new tiles that we're going to cut to size. With the tiles cleaned and cut to size, we moved on to mixing the mortar. This is the mortar that we picked up at the Home Depot. It's made for large format tile, which is what we're using. We followed the instructions on the bag, but we would recommend first adding mortar, then adding water a little bit at a time to help control the consistency. With our first pour, we definitely had too much water and kept having to add more mortar. We're using a mixing paddle on our drill to mix to a smooth, paste-like consistency. We mixed it for up to 5 minutes, then we waited 10 minutes, then we remixed the mortar without adding any more water. We're also working smarter, not harder, so we're using our Gorilla garden cart to move our supplies to the front of the house. We're using a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch carbon steel notch trowel. This size was recommended to us from the associate in the tile department at the Home Depot since we're using large format tile. I first applied a skim coat with the flat side of the trowel. You notice I'm using a kneeling pad to protect my knees, as this is a must for flooring projects. I'm also wearing a jumpsuit to help protect my arms and legs from the mortar, which will really dry out your skin if you come in contact with it. We found it most efficient for Mom to use a small trowel to add mortar to the larger trowel. With the skim coat done, I applied mortar with the notch side at a 45-degree angle. This definitely took a lot of getting used to, and I think I'd perfect the method the more times I do tiling projects. I did think the mortar was a little bit runny, so I tried to add more mortar mix on the next set of steps. With the mortar done on this step, I started by adding the tiles to the front first, then added the second row and the third row. I did use tile spacers for the initial layout, but removed them in the next step to give a little bit more flexibility. Next, we're leveling out the tiles and adding more mortar as needed, making sure every tile had plenty of mortar for a good solid connection. Once we were sure this step was done, we moved on to the next set of steps. Also, before the mortar dried, we used a toothbrush to remove any mortar in the grout line. To clean off the mortar from the tile, we used a damp microfiber cloth. For the bottom set of steps, I repeated the same process. The mortar bag instructions were not clear on the working time for the mixed mortar, but generally concrete takes about 24 hours to cure. So we did have about an hour between these two steps, and we used the same mixed mortar and it seemed to work well. I highly recommend, if you're going to do a tiling project, to talk to a knowledgeable associate at your hardware store, as they'll be able to recommend and point out the exact materials that you'll need for your project. I wore nitrile gloves to protect my hands from the product and had plenty of extra gloves on hand when they needed to be changed. Again, with the skim coat done, I moved on to notching the mortar. On the bottom step, we also needed to do a vertical tile, which was definitely the most challenging part of this tiling project. It was hard to keep the mortar in place and clean from the concrete underneath, but Mom did a great job of following behind me and keeping the area clean. Before I place the tiles, Mom wet the back for better adherence. We're using plastic shims to hold these tiles up to give room for the grout. We're starting with the front of these steps so that we can get placement correct on the vertical tiles. With the front done, I started to place the remainder of the tiles. Again, I added tile spacers to get the initial placement, but then removed them for a little bit more flexibility. And again, we made sure there was enough mortar under the tiles to make sure the height was level with all the other tiles. And here it is, all done and curing. We let this sit for 24 hours before moving on to the grout stage, which we'll share in our next video. And if you want more information on why we had to do this project, please watch our overview video right here. And for more projects from us, please visit us at motherdaughterprojects.com.